My name's Nate Harper. I'm 33 years old, and I spent the last 8 years of my life as a wildland firefighter out in Northern California. I ran headfirst into burning forests when everyone else was running out. But the last fire I ever faced, it took more from me than I ever thought possible. I lost my left leg below the knee in a blaze that killed 2 of my crew. One of them was my best friend, Danny, a loudmouth guy from Texas who could cook the worst chili on earth and still make you ask for seconds. He died screaming my name while I was stuck under a collapsed beam, half my leg crushed and my radio full of static. They pulled me out. They didn't pull him. That was 7 months ago. I spent most of the time since then in a rehab facility outside Sacramento, learning how to walk with a prosthetic, how to sleep without screaming, and mostly how to convince myself I still deserve to wake up each morning. And then December rolled around. My mom called me a week before Christmas. Her voice was soft, like she was afraid I'd hang up. "Nate," she said, "why don't you come home for Christmas this year? Your dad, he's changed. He's calmer now. And your sister misses you." I don't know what made me say yes. Maybe I just wanted to believe someone still wanted me around. That maybe I could find some sliver of warmth in a house I hadn't stepped foot in for nearly 5 years. I grew up in a quiet Montana town where everyone knew your business before you even opened your mouth. My dad, Rick Harper, used to be a construction foreman, loud, stone-faced, and allergic to emotion. Growing up with him felt like living in a never-ending boot camp. He never said, "I'm proud of you," never said, "I love you." But he had no trouble saying, "Get over it," even when I was 13 and crying at our dog's funeral. When I told him I wanted to become a firefighter, he called it a poor man's suicide mission. When I lost my leg, he didn't call at all. But when I landed in Bozeman and stepped into the cold December air, I held on to the smallest hope that maybe things could be different. I arrived at the house Christmas Eve. It looked exactly the same. Peeling white paint, one flickering porch light, and the old Buick still leaking oil in the driveway. My mom opened the door before I even knocked. She looked older than I remembered, but her hug was real. Long, tight. My sister Jamie was there too, still bubbly, still calling me Captain Smoke like we were kids again. And then there was my dad. He didn't hug me, didn't even offer a handshake. Just stood at the kitchen counter with a beer in his hand and nodded once like I was a neighbor dropping by to borrow a wrench. Dinner that night was ham, mashed potatoes, and awkward silence. I tried to fill the space, asked about his work, about the neighbor's dog that used to bark every night. He barely replied. My prosthetic leg tapped under the table with every movement, and each time, his jaw clenched just a little tighter. I gave him a gift after dinner, a book on antique motorcycles. He used to love fixing them up. He took it, didn't open it, and mumbled, "Didn't expect anything." I should have left then, but I didn't. I stayed the night. I slept in my old room, now half storage, half ghost town. I woke up 5 times from nightmares I'd worked months to quiet down. Christmas morning, we gathered around the table again. My mom served pancakes. Jamie lit a candle. It looked like a Hallmark card. Then Dad cleared his throat. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. And then, in front of everyone, in the middle of a bite of bacon, he said, "You walk around like some war hero, Nate. But all I see is a guy who came back broken and expects a damn trophy for surviving. You're not inspiring. You're a burden. And frankly, I want you out of my house." The fork dropped from my hand. My mom gasped. Jamie whispered, "Dad, what the hell?" But I didn't move. I just sat there, like I was back in the fire again. Trapped, heat rising around me, no way out. My father slammed his hand on the table. "You heard me. Get out." And I did. I got up, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the snow. But not before Jamie slipped something into my hand. A small rusted key. She didn't say a word, just closed my fingers around it and nodded toward the woods behind our house. I had no idea what it opened, but I was about to find out. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt the tears freeze on my cheeks. The Montana air cut through my coat like a knife, and every step I took away from that house made my prosthetic leg ache, but I kept going. I didn't look back. The whole way down that snowy trail behind the house, I clutched that rusted key like it was oxygen. I didn't know what it opened. I just knew Jamie had slipped it into my palm with trembling fingers and a look that said, "Please trust me." 20 minutes later, past the edge of the woods and over a frozen creek, I found it. The old trapper's cabin our grandpa had built decades ago. We used to play there as kids, pretending it was a fort or a pirate ship. I hadn't been back since high school. The door creaked open with a push. It smelled like pine, dust, and memories. The place was empty except for a cot, an old cast-iron stove, and a broken-down rocking chair. But it had a roof. And silence. God, the silence. I dropped my bag, sat on the cot, and stared at the floor until the sun went down. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, listening to the wind howl through the cracks in the walls. My father's words kept ringing in my ears. "You're not inspiring. You're a burden." I thought I'd felt pain before. The burns, the loss of my leg, watching Danny die. But nothing cut as deep as hearing my own father say he didn't want me. Not because I did something wrong, but because I came back broken. In the morning, I chopped firewood with one leg and a whole lot of rage. I hadn't used an axe in years, but every swing felt like therapy. By the end of the week, I had the stove working, cleared out the dust, and fixed the window latches. I ate canned beans and slept under 3 blankets. But somehow, it felt more like home than that house ever did. Jamie came by twice a week. She never stayed long. Just dropped off groceries or firewood, sometimes a book or a note. One time, she brought me a little solar-powered light, whispering, "Mom wanted to come, but Dad lost it when he found out I'd seen you." She said he called me a grown man playing pity games in the woods. That should have shattered me, but weirdly it didn't. I was numb. Until one day, Jamie showed up with a bruised lip. She smiled like nothing was wrong, set a basket of groceries down and turned to leave like usual, but I stopped her. "What happened to your face?" I asked. My voice was quiet, not angry, just empty. She hesitated, then sat down on the rocking chair, her coat still zipped. "Dad's been drinking more," she whispered. "He saw I transferred some money to you. I told him it was mine, money I earned, but he didn't like that." I felt something rupture inside me. It wasn't just about me anymore. He was starting to take the same poison he poured into me and drip it onto her. "I'm fine," she insisted. "I just want you to keep going. You're doing better. You don't need to come back." But she was wrong. I did need to go back, just not in the way she meant. The next day, I went into town for the first time in months. I wore a beanie, long coat, and walked slow. People stared. Some nodded. A few whispered. I didn't care. I went to the local hardware store, bought lumber, tools, and a cheap secondhand laptop. I started building. Not just the cabin, but something bigger. A few weeks later, I created a website. Just a simple page, Fire to Frost, rebuilding a life from ash. I didn't post my name, just the story, the scars, the cabin, a few pictures. I didn't expect much, just wanted to get it out. Let it breathe. But then it spread. People shared it, messaged me. Other vets, firefighters, survivors, people who were thrown out by their families or called a burden for surviving something that broke them. And then, one morning, I got an email. Subject line, "We saw your site. We'd like to feature your story." Sender, the local news station. And below that, a line I'll never forget. "Rick Harper's son lives in the woods. Not the hero he said died." I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold in my hands. My father had been telling people I died in that fire. I stared at that email for a long time. Long enough for my coffee to turn cold and the wind to start rattling the cabin windows. "Rick Harper's son lives in the woods. Not the hero he said died." I reread it. Again. And again. I didn't even know how to react at first. My father, the same man who looked me in the eye on Christmas morning and called me a burden, had told people I was dead. Not just gone. Dead. He'd been walking around town, soaking up pity, milking sympathy from neighbors who used to look at me like I was the kid with the bright future. I could almost hear him, that signature gravel in his voice. Lost my boy in the fire. Toughest damn kid you ever met. It hit me like a truck. Not just the betrayal, but the intent. He hadn't just erased me from his house. He'd tried to erase me from the world. Jamie confirmed it that night. She showed up at the cabin, eyes wide, shaking. She didn't even sit down. "They called me," she said. "Channel 7. They asked for a comment. Wanted to know if you'd really survived the Granite Valley fire and if the man who claimed to be your father had lied." She looked at me like she wanted to disappear. "Nate, he's been getting donations from the community, even the city fire fund. He told them you died a hero. They gave him a plaque, a check, a funeral. My knees gave out." I sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the floor, trying to breathe. My father had cashed in on my death. "You need to come forward," Jamie said, her voice shaking. "You need to tell the truth." But I wasn't sure I could. Not yet. See, there's something about being burned, whether by fire or family, that makes you cautious. I wasn't going to barge into town screaming. That's what he'd expect. So I did what I'd learned to do best. I watched. I listened. I waited. I spent the next week researching, quietly. I found pictures of my own funeral on Facebook. A fake urn. A framed photo of me in my fire gear. My father standing next to it, stoic as ever. A folded flag in his hands. He told reporters I'd died saving a kid who didn't even exist. Claimed I'd left behind a letter saying I forgave him. That was the part that made my skin crawl. Not the money. Not the award. But the lie of forgiveness. He took the one thing I still had, my story, and twisted it into a trophy. So I wrote a new one. I went back to my site. Added a post. This time I did include my name, my face, my leg, the whole truth. Title, "Dead Men Don't Get PTSD." I shared the pictures from rehab, the x-rays, the discharge report, a photo of the same cabin I now lived in, and a caption. While my father collected donations for my funeral, I was learning to walk again. Alone. The post exploded overnight. Veterans reposted it. Firefighter forums picked it up. Local activists shared it on Twitter. But the part that really set it off? The clip. Jamie had dug it up from the Channel 7 archives, an interview from my funeral. In it, my father, dressed in black, held my photo and said, "My son died a hero." I just wish I had the chance to tell him how proud I was before he went. I posted the clip alongside a short video I filmed in front of the cabin, one leg visible, the snowy forest behind me. I looked into the camera, dead calm, and said, "Hey, Dad, you had your chance." That was it. Just those 5 words. Within 48 hours, the mayor's office retracted the donation. The city fire fund launched an investigation. Local news outlets scrambled to correct the story. And then, something I didn't expect. A subpoena. Delivered to me. Turns out my father had filed for ownership of Fire to Frost, claiming he'd helped inspire and fund the project. I laughed when I read it. Actually laughed out loud. But the twist didn't stop there. When I opened the envelope further, I found a copy of a notarized letter, allegedly written by me, transferring full rights of the website, the brand, and any associated media to Rick Harper, signed in my name. Only problem? It was dated 2 weeks after the fire. 2 weeks after I was intubated, unconscious, and hooked up to machines in a Sacramento burn unit. I wasn't just fighting for my story now. I was fighting against a father who'd forged my name while I was nearly dead. When I saw the forged letter with my name on it, dated 2 weeks after I was flatlined and full of morphine, something in me just snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just a cold, still kind of snap, like a wire finally pulled too tight. I sat on the cabin floor for a long time, holding that letter, staring at the handwriting that almost looked like mine. Almost. My name, bent into a signature I hadn't written. He was trying to own me again, just like when I was a kid. When I had to run his errands, eat my anger, wear silence like armor. When I got accepted to the fire academy and he sneered, "Why chase fires when you can learn a real trade?" I thought I'd escaped him, but he followed me right into the ashes. This time, I wasn't going quiet. I didn't want pity. I wanted the truth to weigh as much as it was worth. So I went to the one person who knew what being erased felt like. Jamie. She didn't hesitate. Let's bury him with facts. She pulled up my hospital records, official timelines, scans, videos of me unconscious with a feeding tube and third-degree burns. There was no way I could have signed anything, much less a full legal transfer. We found more, too. Turns out he didn't just lie. He laundered sympathy into cash. Over $14,000 in community donations, most of which went straight into his bar tab and a brand new ATV he parked proudly outside the house like a trophy. Jamie got pissed all over again when she saw the receipts. "You almost died," she said through gritted teeth. "And he bought a four-wheeler." I didn't reply. I was too focused. Next move? A lawyer. I contacted a guy in Missoula, veteran-owned firm. I told him everything. Sent the forged letter, the documents, the website history, the donation trail. He read it, exhaled hard, and said, "This isn't just a civil issue. This is fraud. If you're ready, I'll file both." We filed lawsuit, criminal complaint, and a cease and desist that hit my father's mailbox like a grenade. The town caught wind fast, and when the story made it to the local news, a real one this time, it lit up like dry brush. Neighbors who once praised him started whispering. His plaque got quietly removed from the town hall wall. The bar he used to brag in? The bartender told him not to come back. And me? I started building something real. With the lawyer's help, I turned Fire to Frost into a registered nonprofit to help firefighters and veterans recover from trauma, especially those who lost more than just skin. We opened a small community center in town, just 2 rooms in a rented building, but it had a wood stove, a coffee pot, and a safe place to talk. First time I walked in with Jamie, my prosthetic leg squeaked on the old linoleum floor. But it was mine. Ours. Then came the day I didn't expect. A letter, no return address. Inside, a photograph. A black and white print of me and Danny, my crewmate who died in that fire. We were 26, covered in ash, smiling like idiots, holding up a burnt shovel like it was a trophy. On the back, in blocky handwriting I didn't recognize, it said, "He knew the truth. I think you should know too. Look up the Granite Valley Report, page 37. I sat down. My hands were shaking. I pulled the state's investigation report out of the folder where I'd buried it months ago, too scared to read more than the executive summary. I flipped to page 37. There it was. Black and white, buried in a paragraph like it was nothing. Initial crew placement report indicates crewman Nate Harper requested to return for a second sweep of the structure, against advisory, citing potential presence of trapped civilians. No civilian was confirmed. The secondary explosion occurred minutes later. 1 fatality, 1 critical injury. Cause of explosion, improperly stored accelerant. I reread it. 5 times. Improperly stored accelerant. There wasn't supposed to be any accelerant on site. It wasn't a commercial structure, just an old storage shed behind a ranch house. I dug deeper, searched public records. Guess who signed off on the renovation permits for that property 6 months prior? Rick Harper. My father. My father had done the renovation work. Used off-the-books chemicals to speed up repairs. Never reported them. He'd never told me. Never told anyone. He sent me into that fire knowing damn well it could blow. I sat alone in the dark that night. Just me, the photograph, and the truth that felt heavier than the leg I'd lost. My father knew. not just about the fire. He caused it. Or at the very least, he built the matchbox that let it explode. I had gone in thinking I was risking my life to save a stranger. But I'd been walking straight into a bomb that he'd wired with shortcuts and silence. I stared at the line again. Improperly stored accelerant. His signature on the permits. The date matching the job. It all lined up. Suddenly, everything else made sense. The fake funeral, the forged letter, the desperate grab for my story. He wasn't just lying to control the narrative. He was covering his own ass. And I was the collateral damage. Again. But this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. The next morning, I took the report, the photo, and every bit of evidence to my lawyer. He didn't say much, just pressed his lips together and nodded slowly. "This changes everything," he finally said. "This isn't just fraud or defamation. This is potential criminal negligence, maybe even manslaughter." I felt my stomach twist at the word. Manslaughter. Danny's death. My leg. The explosion that rewrote both our lives. All of it could be traced back to one man who cut corners and never thought he'd have to pay for it. We filed the new complaint within 48 hours. State investigators reopened the Granite Valley case, this time with new eyes and a different target. They subpoenaed my father. For the first time in his life, he couldn't talk his way out of it. The town turned cold fast. The same people who once gave him sympathy now crossed the street when they saw him. Donations were pulled. His accounts frozen. The city revoked his plaque, his Fire Family of the Year award, even the cheap gold plate they nailed to a park bench in my name. I didn't show up to the court hearings. I didn't need to. The truth did the work for me, but Jamie went. She sat there, front row, chin high, and watched as our father finally had to answer for everything he'd buried beneath his charm and threats. He took a plea deal, avoiding prison, but not shame. They stripped him of his contracting license, fined him to hell and back, and made him pay restitution to Danny's family. The final blow? He had to stand in front of the town and publicly admit that his actions contributed to a firefighter's death, that his negligence could have cost more lives, that his son had almost died cleaning up his mess. They made him say my name, loud, clear, no lies. I didn't need revenge. That moment was justice. Today, the cabin's not just mine anymore. It's a home base for the nonprofit. We've got volunteers, a new deck, even a therapy dog named Moxie who loves stealing socks. Jamie handles most of the operations now. She's better with people than I ever was. I still have the nightmares. Still hear the fire some nights, the metal creaking, the world going sideways. But I'm not scared of it anymore. Because now I know it wasn't my fault. It was his. And I survived it all anyway. You know, people talk about closure like it's a neat little door you shut behind you. But that's not what it felt like for me. Closure was more like a controlled burn. Painful, hot, terrifying. But sometimes the only way to clear space for something new to grow. If you've been carrying something like that. An invisible weight. A silence that doesn't let you breathe. I hope my story reminds you. You can speak up, and you're not alone. Thanks for sitting with me through all of this. If any part of my story hit close to home, I'd be grateful if you shared yours in the comments. Or maybe just leave a note for someone who needs to know they're not broken. And hey, if you want to stick around, hit subscribe. We've got more stories to tell out here in the woods. Real ones. The kind you survive to speak.